Hey everyone, Hanz here. I hope you're doing well. Before I get into this video's topic, I'm going to quickly mention that Thunraz the Thulian is back online. You can buy a copy for those that have been waiting. I know there are plenty who do and who had to give it a week or something, or has it been a week and a half before things got settled and then restarted properly. But that day has come. It's fully active again, so by all means, if you wanna get yourself a copy, you can do so, and the link will be below if you need some help with that. Just type in Thunraz the Thulian in Amazon and you should find it regardless. Okay, just real quick also guys, the air is really dry and hot, so I'm going to struggle a little bit today. It can't be helped, I think. I'm already glad I found some shade. But yeah, bear with me. I'm fine, by the way. It's just the weather right now. Okay, having said that, where to begin? You see, most liberals, or all of them actually, that Hanz knows of, are people that come from broken households usually, or had difficult childhoods, or they were excessively spoiled. It's one of the two, very common. And this turned them into a sort of sensation-seeking creature that is rather anti-spiritual. You don't let the dream catchers and all of that, the Buddha statues, don't let it fool you. That is something that they do not only to fool you, not only to fool Hanz, but also to fool themselves, because these people wear masks. They are not themselves. They're not genuine, if that makes sense. They're not the people that they were born to be. They are wearing a pretense of something that they think they should to please others, and for themselves they allow them just enough that they let their bodies be these sensation machines for themselves that can manifest in food, eating all types of food. It can manifest in drug abuse. It can manifest with just drinking, smoking, being very much involved with what is that called again? Well, it can be anything really, anything involving entertainment for them. For some people it can be addiction to cars, almost even. To others it can be video games, etc, etc. oh boy, etc. That does not mean that there is anything wrong in and of itself with having a beer once in a while, or a cigarette, or playing a video game. I'm talking about people who lack anything in themselves as far as feelings go, so they have to suck it out of something else, which they do by all kinds of excesses of all natures. Now you might and of course there is also the lack of self-control that they tend to have. It kind of goes hand in hand, I suppose, with not feeling anything else but a want for sensation. So that means that they are naturally also going to be irresponsible, amoral, not even necessarily immoral, which I'll leave it up to you whether you think that is even worse or not. And they are antipathic in the extreme usually. Now, of course, speaking about masks, they want to present themselves to the world as something better than they truly are in behavior, and they do it usually with their big mouths. They do it in public where others see them. That is where the whole virtue signaling concept comes from. People have noticed that, but they have not really looked into the why. Like, why would you virtue signal? Well, to these people, virtue is not really a part of their being. It's again something you use to get what you want. And if you do not have people who understand that is what they are doing it for, and just instead of calling these types out as, no, you're just pretending because you don't feel anything for anyone, rather than saying that, they let themselves be lured in all these rabbit holes. whatever it's going to be. Oh, you want to save the whales, or you want to stick it to, well, that's actually another thing. Let's say with saving the whales and all that, it's not because they actually care about the whales, it's just so they can make themselves look good. Oh, how empathic, how virtuous, how caring. They don't care. No, it's not in them. You might have a handful of people there who do actually care, but they are actually there for the whales. They're not there to look good. And well, it might be a bit difficult sometimes to tell the difference, but there you go. Usually it's when if you really want to test that, you should have them do something that makes them deny the sensations they constantly seek. I find that being indifferent to them, something as if you're hateful or angry towards them, you still give them energy, and that is the attention they also crave. That gives them sensations. But if you're indifferent and you say your happiness or grief is here nor there for me, there's a power in that's where you truly confront them with themselves, because their mask is not working on you one way or the other. Yeah, they're also very fond of dictatorships, and many are already thinking about how is that possible? Why would someone who is all about sensation, why would someone like that want a dictator? Well, that is simple. It is actually because they have no self-control. There is no self-discipline there, so they have to get after. They need an external force to tell them, to give them boundaries, essentially. And the more brutal, I suppose, the more in a sort of sick way they like it. And it again, if you then give these types also an enemy to fight, let's say the white race, well, even if they're white themselves, again, they're irresponsible types. They do not care, they're not empathic, so it does not matter to them. It's like they'll burn their own heritage to the ground if they can if they can look good, if you will, for whomever might think that is a good thing. They're the ideal stooges for those who want to destroy the white race in general, for any anti-white thus making them anti-whites too. But there is also another part to that. It's like, why the white race though, for example? It's because they are very resentful creatures. They are envious of anyone who has a capacity for spirituality, for self-discipline, for to attain glory and what have you. And in that sense, they actually really complement the white race. Hanz does not say that. No, the psychology says so. Their envy says so. You will find that their households are usually a mess, and that they tend to be wastrels who spend all what they inherit from their father or grandfather, in exchange for all kinds of drugs and excesses. Gamble it all away, that sort of thing, just so they can have that feeling in the moment, whatever it's going to be. Or maybe I should also quickly mention, of course, that sexuality is also just no more than something for them to pump out dopamine or whatever it's going to be, all kinds of hormones in their body. There is no real love there. It's really just, it's the jaded, almost in a certain sense atheistic view of being a piece of meat that is just slapping against another piece of meat. It's gruesome when you think about it as such, or at least to me it is. I hope the noise in the back isn't too loud. But yeah, what can one say to that? And of course this comes with all the diseases and genital injuries and what have you that follow from there. But that is also, I want to say too much at once. The thing is, at some point you get jaded if you do this too much. That tends to be how it goes. That's where you get like these blue bags on their eyes. It's when they look as if they're in their 60s, when they're still only 30. That's also where the whole story is like, oh, by the time you're 30, life is over, that sort of stuff. When you hear that, yeah, I guess for them it is, because they ruined their bodies, right? They did not care for themselves, they did not look after themselves, so they're gonna have these, bloated, exhausted, worn out bodies that are practically, yeah, ready to stop working properly at any minute after imbibing all the things they imbibed. Whereas someone who wouldn't do that is, a spring chicken into his 60s or her 60s, or whatever it's going to be, right? Yeah, so with that comes a certain form of depression, jaded, blah blah blah. So that's where they need someone to tell them, to give them boundaries, so they don't do that to themselves too much. And yeah, they would have it at sword point or at gun point. It's that insane, I suppose. Anything else to worth adding to that? And of course, in the meantime, if they can then harm those that they feel resentful towards, that's only a bonus, right? Now, why resentful? It's because the people they are resentful towards are those that, it's not just about the disagreement in and of itself, although most of them have inflated egos who can't take a no, so they will get very vicious if they are presented a no. Nonetheless, they are also incapable of creating beauty. They're sort of like parasites, if you will, vampires. They need to suck the life out of everything, and they will. And anything that represents life, spirituality, health, talent, creativity, wonder, amazement, they are going to try to stomp it out. It's where Tolkien's orcs come from. These orcs were originally elves, right? Until the orc became a thing in and of itself. But the potential for orcs, like if Tolkien had been more precise, you would have actually orcish families where elves can be born out of, and that sort of thing. But yeah, what have you? His stories are amazing enough as it is, without adding that whole. Without adding that in there. Yeah. That's what I have witnessed in most people. I have encountered one of them who, while completely intoxicated, admitted as much that she loves a dictator. Now, from experience, from understanding what that person's story was, is that she had an abusive father who would act like a dictator, would belittle her and would belittle her sibling, and both of them ended up the worse for it. Now, I'm gonna throw it in there that you have the choice though. There are plenty of people who have been abused in their childhood who end up being responsible, decent people. They had the strength of character or the goodness in their hearts to say the cycle of abuse ends with them, with their generation, and good on them. That also means that everyone has a choice in that, and if there are these who want to give in, okay, but you are still going to be responsible for what you do henceforth. That someone had an abusive parent, it's not their fault. But that they then in turn become abusers, well, that is their fault. Hard though it may be to be a good person or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Life can be tough on anyone, right? There are of course those who, like I mentioned, there are those who are during their maturity phase, let's say in their teenage years, they become introduced into a world of sensation, and that is the only thing worth pursuing, and blah blah blah. And there are these types who really embrace that. Types who do not really have to work a hard day in their lives, not once. Wouldn't even know what end of a shovel to pick up, for example. Would have their arms tremble in pain at the idea of lifting up a bucket of water or whatever, or a haystack. and their backs would immediately give out. These types are used to comfort as a sort of norm throughout life. And that also creates this attitude, I suppose, where the least bit of pain they feel is something that they have to run away from. Like that pain is something that warns you, but it also can strengthen you. But if you are constantly in flight of that, well, that does not create a healthy mindset in the individual in question. And these types Hanz has observed in the highest places of power usually. Yeah, the typical wastrel, I suppose. Is there anything else worth adding? Oh yeah, of course, for children born in such families, Hanz has witnessed this, is that these types will see their children as tools to be used. They will ruin the lives of their children for another day of comfort. They will do it. And they won't even think twice about it. If the child would defend itself one way or the other, whether it's a 7-year-old or an 18-year-old, it does not matter. These children will be met with all kinds of verbal abuse, maybe physical abuse, and what have you. In some horrible scenarios, these children are given away in the hands of horrible people, let's put it like that. And I'm not gonna dwell too much on that anymore. I guess more news on that in general in the future. But yeah, Hanz has seen several examples that Hanz has personally witnessed. A daughter from a household that got disinherited, even though, and how did that happen? It's like a grandparent died, and the whole family ran off with the inheritance, bungled the papers up and what have you, that the part of the inheritance to the daughter would simply stay in their own hands, which they then promptly wasted on all kinds of nonsense, and well, there you go. I have seen cases where children are assumed to just earn money for these so-called parents, for the people that brought them into the world. They do not deserve to be called parents, actually. And yeah, that it's nothing more, that it isn't more than normal that the children give them stuff, or that they dump their personal traumas onto their children. That's also very common. They use their children as tools. They will lie in the face of their own child about how they want to protect them and how much they love them. Love bombing, basically, as narcissists tend to do. Need to check my video on that out. Love bombing them. It's like, oh, you're so wonderful, you're so great, I love you, I want to protect you, which is no more than two things there. It's to make themselves feel good by saying nice things. Oh, what an amazing being I am for saying all these nice things, that sort of thing. And at the same time, it's all just a lie. It's part of the mask. And the creepiest part of all of this is, of course, that the children do not know who these people really are. And what do I mean by that? Is that these people are presenting a mask even to their children. I mean, they're doing it to themselves, so why not their child as well, right? And it's all about pretense. It's all about looking good. It's all about making themselves seem amazing and wonderful and loving and flower power and we need to save the world and we need to save nature and the ego tripping involved with that, or inflated ego tripping involved with that, the dopamine shots that they give themselves, with all these wonderful speeches. And of course they're gonna want their dictators to enforce those speeches, right? And you see then how some clever anti-whites in power take advantage of that. Or is Hanz just telling nonsense? Probably nonsense, right guys? Yeah. Now, yeah, I think I've said predominantly all that I wanted to throw in there. It's a bit of yeah, I guess it's vague enough that it's not really that much of an anecdote after all. A little bit here and there. I also noticed that these people, when they marry, the marriages are also always temporary. It doesn't last long, and if they stay together, it's usually that is usually because the drug abuse is so fierce, or it's that they're so afraid to die alone. It's not even out of love for their spouse or what have you. And yeah, it was all about the feelings. It was about that one magical day when they had the entire crowd looking at them when they stood at the altar and all of that, right? And it's been nothing but misery ever since. I've seen a bit of both, where the houses that they live in are actually fairly nice, actually, well cared for, nicely renovated usually. They do tend to be people who are on all kinds of government support. And they will, oh, and they're also very much, they're also all about consensus, public consensus. They do not care really for anything, they just say what they think the crowd wants to hear, right? So that's also why a lot of them are now sweating about the whole situation of the last 2-3 years. You know what I'm on about. Like the perspiration is starting to appear on their foreheads because they see that the consensus is changing, and most of them had such a big mouth about hurting people who did not go along with it and what have you, is that, well, yeah, so you were willing to like, the mask fell off, the resentment that they felt, the envy really came out among many of them. Some of them were just smart enough not to go there, I suppose, but many did, and now they know that people know. The mask was gone there for a year or so, or a year or two, and they thought they had it in the bag, but I guess not. Have you met such people in your life? Are you seeing it in your life? Now, why is Hanz bringing all of this up? I think there is simply a value to it, to know these things. There are people who go far more in depth than I, and good on them. I definitely wanted to throw my voice in that conversation, and I think for white well-being, there are such types in the white positive sphere. They're not there because they care, they are there because they just see an opportunity to look good, or they see an opportunity to take advantage of people that are still starting to get up from the floor after having been beaten for a century or so, or centuries, depends on how you want to look at it. And they see that guy that is getting up is actually pretty tough, a pretty tough guy. Is there anything else to add to that? Yeah, the value in general is just for you in your personal life. Hanz isn't saying that everyone needs to get together and blah blah blah. I used to think a little bit like that, never in uniform way, of course. No, it's that everyone's gonna do his or her own thing to the best of his or her capacities, and that will see the day through. It's and maybe real quick, you might also say, yeah, but what about the types who really like this shaggy appearance? They're kind of a mess. They don't have any self-control. Their house is just a junkyard. Their garden is a junkyard, whatever it's going to be. Again, these are people who are just deeper into a certain psychosis, perhaps. Because if you have this mask on, it comes with cowardice, and the reward for cowardice is madness, right? If all the fear, if all the pain, if you yourself is something that you're running away from, you're going in this endless downward spiral, up until the point that you could decide to no longer be a coward, but now you have to climb that entire spiral back up before you get into the real upward spiral. And that is a lot of work, and it's painful work, it's hard work. It's something that a lot of them And yeah, the whole point for them is to run away from that, so what are you gonna do, right? They would really rather probably be, well, I'm not gonna say it, but they would have a dictator do as dictators tend to do. They would probably smile up until the last minute. Yeah. I guess this helps if you recognize this in people that you know. It might help you understand why they do what they do, and it might also help you understand how trustworthy they are or are not. Again, it's up to you to decide that. Hanz can't say. Hanz can only share what he has experienced. And also, I suppose, if you are someone who really wants to stand up and be a good person and do the right thing and protect your heritage, watch after your roots, know that these envious types that hate that in and of itself, right? This might, mulling on this might give you, or you can give yourself the vocabulary, if you will, to truly make a stand against them, because the whole political discussion of it all, or the many thousands of them, the discussions on how much is okay and how little should, what, all of that, it's all by the wayside. That's not what it's about to them. That's all just a distraction. You cannot be talking to the mask if you want something to be done. You need to look right through the mask that these types are wearing, right through the mask of the movements that they are, bringing into being. And you call it out. You cast the sun's rays onto the vampire. And we all know from the stories what happens then. And no, glittering isn't part of it. The glitter completely vanishes. Real quick, actually. So yeah, if, as far as Hanz is concerned, Hanz is going to keep writing. That is one of the ways how Hanz goes about it. Hanz is going to keep making videos. There's still so much more Hanz likes to do, but as it stands for now, as I explained in the last video, I'm still tied to a lot of things that drag my attention and my energy and my time away. That's where, yeah, I require the generosity and help of you, for example. But I totally leave it up to you. Is there anything more? Well, I definitely always like to give something back for that support, and I think you all know that by now. I have made videos now. I think it's almost been 3 years now, guys. If at this point I have not proven myself to you, I do not think there's anything else I can do at this point in time with what is available to me to do. But I know for many it is, and I really appreciate those who understand that. And yeah, this video, it's not to bash on anyone, it's just to call it out for what it is, for what Hanz has seen. Are there exceptional liberals who are people of responsibility, nobility, great capacity, a want for beauty, art, what have you? There might be some. I'm not saying there aren't, but Hanz has never seen any of the sort. Could be that they're just being pushed in the back somewhere while all the crazies come out and stand in the front. That is possible. But I'm not holding my breath. And I think that the entire discussion there, once you realize it's all just one huge mask or a series of masks, well, it would be kind of folly to talk to the mask rather than to the actual being behind it. And yeah, that's what I'm gonna that's where I'm gonna leave it for now. I think just call them out for what they are, call them out by what they're doing, call them out why they are doing it perhaps, and see what that yields. Or you're just an anti-white because you had a rough childhood and now you wanted to give others a rough childhood. You were the victim turned villain rather than the victim turned hero. How about that, dirty anti-white? Something like that. What are they gonna say to that? That it isn't true? Oh well, A little bit of investigation is required then, I suppose. Call their family, call their friends. See what that's going to yield, right? And all that sort of lovely stuff. Or not, or not. Okay, gonna leave it there. You'll have a good one. And I'm gonna continue my walk. Bye bye.